Hi, and welcome to Creepy Crime Story, where the darkest truths aren't imagined. They're real. They said it was a break-in, a robbery gone wrong. But when I heard that 911 call, cold, restrained, I knew something was off. People mourn messy. That call was too clean. January 23rd, 2017, Woodland Hills, Los Angeles County. The Cementilli resident sat behind a wrought iron gate on a quiet, sun-drenched street just miles from Mulholland Drive. A two-story stucco home, palm trees, double garage, and a blue-tiled backyard pool. A house designed for privacy, not intrusion. Inside that house was a man with a global name in the beauty industry, and within its fences, at 5:03 p.m., his life ended in what would be classified as a homicide. The first official report was logged at 5:14 p.m. The caller was a teenage girl, later confirmed to be one of the victim's daughters. The transcript noted a panicked but composed voice. "My dad's outside. I think he's been attacked. There's blood everywhere." LAPD patrol arrived on scene within 6 minutes. Fabio Cementilli, male, age 49, Canadian-born, vice president of education at Wella North America, known globally in hairstyling circles, highly visible in industry publications and promotional content. His body was found lying prone on the back patio, adjacent to the pool steps. He had suffered multiple sharp force injuries, including a cluster of defensive wounds to the hands and forearms. Two penetrating wounds to the cervical spine were identified as fatal at the scene. No signs of forced entry, no broken locks. The alarm system had been disarmed earlier that day. Officers noted that the sliding door to the backyard was slightly ajar. There was no indication of ransacking or theft inside the house. No overturned furniture, no missing electronics. One anomaly: the family's black 2008 Porsche 911 Carrera was gone from the driveway. The responding officer noted that Monica Cementilli, the victim's wife, returned to the scene at approximately 5:40 p.m. Her timeline, initially stated, claimed she had been at a nail appointment several miles away at the time of the incident. She remained emotionally flat during initial questioning, according to the first on-scene report. The coroner was called in before sunset. Preliminary cause of death: multiple stab wounds to the upper torso, consistent with a prolonged, violent attack. No firearm discharge. A blood trail extended approximately 6 feet from the location of the assault to the rear patio wall. Analysts at the scene estimated the attack occurred roughly 30 minutes prior to the 911 call, likely between 4:30 and 4:45 p.m. By 8:00 p.m., CSU, crime scene unit, had begun a methodical collection of forensic evidence. DNA swabs were taken from beneath the victim's fingernails. Several hairs not matching the victim's profile were recovered from the collar area of his shirt. No obvious footwear impressions were left behind, likely due to the hardscape surfacing. A partial palm print was lifted from the glass exterior door handle. Gloved or smudged, not conclusively identifiable. The first detail that raised suspicion among detectives wasn't the violence. It was the absence of disorder. "We expect chaos in homicides like this," noted Detective Ramirez, who led the early investigation. "This scene was too quiet, too efficient, no signs of desperation. That made it feel rehearsed." Investigators canvassed neighbors for any visual evidence. A Ring doorbell camera across the street captured a shadowy figure, hooded and moving toward the Cementilli property at 4:29 p.m. The footage showed no return, no license plate, no facial ID. Just a silhouette moving with purpose. Inside the house, nothing appeared out of place. Monica Cementilli's purse was on the kitchen counter. There were signs someone had prepared tea earlier that afternoon: an unused tea bag, one mug with lipstick residue. The family dog remained inside, undisturbed. Forensic analysts took special interest in the security system logs. The data showed the system had been disarmed manually at 11:08 a.m. and never reset. Only 2 passcodes had been issued on the account, one for Monica, one for Fabio. At this point in the investigation, the working theory was an external intruder with access, possibly someone familiar with the family's habits. But no evidence of robbery, no known threats, and a highly targeted use of force created friction against that theory. LAPD's Homicide Special Section opened a deeper probe the following morning. Fabio's workplace contacts were interviewed within 24 hours. They described him as disciplined, loyal to his profession, and deeply family-oriented. One colleague recalled he had recently appeared tired, distracted, like something was weighing on him. But no prior threats had ever been reported to police. From a procedural standpoint, there were no witnesses to the murder, no confession, no obvious motive. What was certain, the victim had died a violent death in his own home without alerting anyone around him. And whoever had done it had left little more than a void and a question. By January 24, 2017, the homicide unit had confirmed the identity and public relevance of the victim. Fabio Cementilli wasn't just another Los Angeles homeowner. He was a name in international circles, a prominent educator and executive in the hair industry, recognized for his decades-long work at Well & Cotty. His face was known at every major trade show. His mentorship had shaped careers globally. Internally, LAPD classified this as a high-profile case. That came with two implications: media scrutiny and pressure for answers. Investigators began mapping the victim's professional life with the same precision they applied to physical evidence. Cementilli's calendar, retrieved from his iPad and synced cloud data, showed appointments lined back to back, photo shoots, academy visits, stylist showcases. The man had no shortage of admirers or contacts. Detectives contacted Well in North America, who provided corporate logs and email records. Nothing in the last 90 days indicated threats, disputes, or grievances. His travel history also painted a portrait of consistency. Fabio had returned from a business trip to Toronto 5 days before his death. He arrived on a Thursday, spent Friday in meetings, and according to time-stamped receipts, spent the weekend at home with family. There was no record of unusual purchases or changes to his travel profile. From a lifestyle standpoint, Fabio kept a low personal footprint. No significant debts, no side ventures, no off-the-books property. His financial records, analyzed by LAPD's Financial Crimes Unit, showed a single joint checking account with his wife, Monica, and two minor trust accounts listed for the children. A life insurance policy valued at $1.6 million had been updated within the previous year, naming Monica as the primary beneficiary. Colleagues and friends described Fabio as generous, high energy, and deeply invested in family. But at least one close friend, interviewed by investigators, noted recent changes. He looked tired, the witness said he was dealing with stress at home, but didn't get into details. Just said something felt heavy. Detectives flagged the comment and began reconstructing Fabio's home life, paralleling forensic work already in progress. A subpoena was issued for digital communications between household members. The couple's cell phone records were secured. While Fabio's device showed standard call patterns, clients, work, family, Monica's data profile showed a heavier volume of encrypted messaging apps, primarily Viber, with one contact dominating activity. Fabio's autopsy was conducted on January 25th at the LA County Medical Examiner Coroner's Office. The full report confirmed 22 sharp force injuries, with a fatal cluster concentrated on the upper back and neck. Defensive wounds were documented on both forearms. No signs of restraint. Toxicology returned clean. No alcohol, no sedatives, no controlled substances. The estimated time of death was confirmed between 4:30 p.m. and 4:45 p.m. The victim was believed to be seated, possibly at ease, when the attack began. No broken furniture, no dragged items. The initial strike was likely from behind, and the pattern suggested someone who knew where to aim. As one coroner noted, these weren't erratic wounds. They were purposeful. From a forensic sequencing standpoint, this now established three critical points. The victim was likely caught off guard. The killer had physical access to the property without obstruction. The nature of the wounds suggested intent over panic. At the same time, detectives revisited surveillance from the neighborhood. The previously mentioned Ring doorbell footage, time-stamped at 4:29 p.m., now became more crucial. The figure captured wasn't just passing by. They entered the property perimeter and were not recorded exiting. While low resolution, the height and gait suggested a male subject. Digital enhancement couldn't produce facial ID, but body movement analysis suggested familiarity with the layout. Still, the question remained: Why would anyone target Fabio? There was no evidence of a robbery, no threats, no known disputes. His background came up clean. No affairs, no gambling, no abuse complaints. Nothing that matched the violence he endured. In murder investigations, the absence of motive can be as telling as motive itself. The clean profile led investigators to one of two possibilities. Either the crime was personal in a way not visible in public life, or the killer wanted it to appear impersonal. As one detective quietly noted in a briefing, the data aligned too cleanly. Sometimes that's the problem. As protocol dictated, law enforcement conducted initial interviews with immediate family. Monica Cementilli was questioned again on January 25th at the West Valley station. She confirmed she had last seen Fabio around noon that day. According to her, he was working from home and planned to grill in the afternoon. She claimed she left the house at 1:45 p.m. for a beauty appointment in Calabasas. The salon appointment was verified. She returned around 5:30 p.m., at which point her daughter had already contacted emergency services. What stood out to detectives wasn't the content of her statements, but the lack of deviation. Each time she repeated the story, it was precise, too precise. People in grief don't hit timestamps with that kind of accuracy, said one investigator. You either remember everything or you don't remember anything. This felt scripted. Still, no evidence had surfaced to contradict her timeline. For now, she remained categorized as next of kin, not a suspect. A week into the investigation, the narrative remained thin. The public profile was perfect. The home secure, the victim respected, the crime scene calculated, and the killer had disappeared without a trace. But when patterns are this clean, experienced investigators know to dig deeper, not wider. On the surface, the Cementilli crime scene looked methodical. Controlled entry, clean exit, no signs of struggle inside. But what investigators learned over the following days is that a perfectly silent house can speak volumes if you know where to listen. LAPD's forensic tech team began a full digital audit of the home security infrastructure. The Cementillis had an alarm system connected to a private monitoring company. The logs showed the system was disarmed at 11:08 a.m. on January 23, 2017. No reactivation occurred afterward. That alone wasn't inherently suspicious. People forget to rearm systems all the time. But context made it critical. Only two users had working access codes, Fabio and Monica. Detectives pulled login records from the account. Fabio's code had last been used 4 days prior, on January 19th, when he returned home from a work trip. The January 23rd disarm matched Monica's PIN. It aligned with her claim that she left for a nail appointment just before 2 p.m. The question wasn't about when she left. It was whether she intentionally left the house unsecured, and if so, why. The doorbell camera footage from the neighbor's home was reviewed again, this time with an enhanced timeline overlay. The unidentified figure entered the edge of frame at 4:29 p.m., moving northbound across the sidewalk. The individual turned left into the Cementilli driveway and disappeared from view. No exit was recorded. A doorbell ping at 4:47 p.m. picked up ambient movement, perhaps footsteps, but no visual data. With no surveillance footage from within the property, detectives turned to alternative sources, Wi-Fi router logs, smart device timestamps, and cloud sync data. Fabio's phone, last unlocked at 4:12 p.m., showed a search for steak marinade recipes. A Bluetooth speaker on the patio last streamed music at 3:54 p.m. Both timelines indicated he was preparing to grill, as Monica had told investigators. What stood out was the router's device activity log. At 4:44 p.m., Fabio's phone disconnected from the Wi-Fi network. Not powered off, just no longer pinging the system. That timestamp narrowed the window of attack to a 10-minute span. More notably, no other new device connected to the network during that time. The implication: the perpetrator didn't linger or attempt to tamper with connected systems. They moved quickly and purposefully. In many homicides, it's the digital trail that offers real-time sequencing, and in this case, silence became its own anomaly. There were no deleted text messages, no fake calls, no corrupted log files. It was all intact, and that's what bothered investigators most. The data aligned too cleanly. Sometimes that's the problem, one forensic analyst noted. It was a theme beginning to emerge in the case. a precision that felt less like chaos and more like calculation. Meanwhile, lab reports from the scene began trickling in. The partial palm print lifted from the rear sliding glass door wasn't a match for Fabio or Monica. The latent print lacked enough data for immediate identification, but was uploaded to AFIS for future cross-reference. Hair fibers recovered from the victim's shirt collar were not a familial match. Analysis showed they came from a male subject, brown in color, approximately 2.5 centimeters in length, cut, not naturally shed. DNA extraction from the follicle was successful. The profile was viable. Analysts flagged it for direct comparison pending suspect identification. The knife used in the attack had not been recovered. The wounds, though, suggested a fixed-blade weapon, possibly a tactical or kitchen-style knife, consistent with wounds from similar cases documented in the region. No missing knives were reported from the home's inventory. LAPD canvassed local hardware and outdoor supply stores for recent cash transactions involving fixed blades. At this stage, there were still no confirmed suspects, but the direction of the investigation had clearly shifted. It wasn't about finding a motive anymore. It was about identifying the person who knew the house well enough to enter without force, move without alerting anyone, and leave without a trace, except for a clean digital signature and one fragment of hair. Monica was asked to return for another voluntary interview. This time, investigators focused more narrowly on the specifics of her departure that day: what time she left, what car she used, which route she took, and if she locked the back sliding door. Her answers remained consistent. She left around 1:45 p.m., drove her own vehicle, and exited through the front. She believed the back door was closed, but couldn't say for certain if it was locked. While her timeline held, the investigators flagged one subtle inconsistency. When asked if Fabio had any plans to host someone that day, friend, coworker, contractor, she answered quickly, "No, he was working from home, just wanted to cook." But Fabio's calendar, recovered from his synced iCloud, showed a 3:30 p.m. entry labeled only as Follow-up R. No phone number, no additional notes. The event was added the evening prior at 9:17 p.m. from a device associated with Monica's Apple ID. Investigators now had their first timeline discrepancy, and a reason to re-examine what Monica may have known, not just about the day of the murder, but about any prearranged visitors. The strangeness of this case wasn't in what was left behind. It was what hadn't been done. No forced entry, no digital tampering, no financial disruption. A crime committed in the middle of the afternoon, on a quiet street, with surgical execution and almost no forensic debris. In towns like Woodland Hills, murders aren't just crimes. They puncture the illusion that routine means safety, and here the routine had been carefully constructed. By the end of January 2017, the Los Angeles Homicide Unit had run out of physical footprints. No eyewitnesses, no weapon recovered, no financial motive that held. The killer had moved through the scene like a ghost, but ghosts don't leave encrypted messaging trails. The forensic pivot came from Monica Cementilli's phone. While Fabio's digital footprint had been relatively light, calendar entries, simple texts, music apps, Monica's device contained a significant volume of communication activity routed through third-party encrypted apps. Among them, Viber stood out. Unlike traditional SMS or even iMessage, Viber allowed for end-to-end encryption, disappearing messages, and secondary device syncing, all of which made it popular among users who wanted privacy and harder for law enforcement to trace without proper digital warrants. A digital warrant was obtained from Monica's iCloud backups. Her Viber account had been linked to cloud sync settings until December 2016. That 30-day lapse created a narrow but exploitable window. A forensic image of her iPad, seized as part of the household device search, yielded recoverable fragments of metadata from Viber, including partial message headers, session IDs, and time logs. The account had exchanged 273 messages with one specific contact in the 72 hours before the murder. While the message content itself had been deleted, timestamps, message lengths, and reply intervals were preserved. The majority of these exchanges happened between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m., outside Monica's stated waking hours. The contact had no associated name in the user profile. But investigators traced the linked phone number to a prepaid device registered to a P.O. box in Encino. Further digging revealed the number had once belonged to a man named Robert Louis Baker. Robert Baker was not in Fabio's circle. He had no known connection to the beauty industry, Wella or Cody. But a DMV record showed that Baker had lived in the West Valley region from 2002 to 2006. Years before Monica and Fabio moved into their Woodland Hills home, a deeper background check showed Baker's prior criminal record. One conviction for sexual battery in 1993, and a brief stint as an adult film performer under a stage name no longer used. He was in every practical sense off the grid. There was no immediate evidence linking Baker to the crime scene. But the volume and timing of communication between Monica and Baker raised investigative red flags. Detectives filed a secondary warrant for Baker's mobile device data and IP logs. It was approved by a judge in mid-February. Meanwhile, the forensic team continued examining household Wi-Fi router logs, which had stored device access data going back 2 weeks. On the afternoon of January 23rd, one unknown MAC address had pinged the home's network for less than 20 seconds at 4:27 p.m., just 2 minutes before the unidentified figure appeared on the neighbor's Ring camera. The device was likely a phone in airplane mode, briefly reconnecting via Wi-Fi before being disabled again. The MAC address, traced through manufacturer prefix data, matched the signature of a mid-2010s Android device, similar to the models often used as burner phones. This short-lived signal became a central data point. Baker's known devices had used the same manufacturer code, though a direct MAC match couldn't be confirmed without access to his physical device. Investigators began building a timeline of digital interaction. The last Viber session between Monica and Baker had occurred at 3:18 p.m. on the day of the murder. The exchange included 2 outgoing messages and 1 voice note, deleted but time-stamped and geotagged. The session originated from a location 3 miles northeast of the crime scene. LAPD obtained traffic cam footage for the nearest intersection. At 3:41 p.m., a black 2-door coupe was recorded traveling westbound, model consistent with a vehicle Baker had previously owned. None of this was enough to make an arrest, but as the lead detective later remarked, some people delete their messages, others just hide them in plain sight. Monica was not informed of these findings immediately. LAPD protocol required chain of evidence integrity. Surveillance was increased. Investigators wanted to observe whether Monica would reach out to Baker again, or if he would resurface at all. But after the murder, all contact between their known devices ceased. Instead, a new trace emerged. In late February, Monica's daughter attempted to reset an old family tablet. The device, last used in 2015, reactivated under Monica's Apple ID. During device sync, an undeleted backup of Viber surfaced, containing fragments of conversation logs including references to resetting things, starting over, and doing it carefully this time. One particular log stood out. It was time-stamped 5 days before Fabio's murder. The message read, "You said no more waiting. I'm ready when you are." The origin phone for that message was confirmed as the same prepaid number used to contact Monica during the week of the crime. The implication was chilling. The coordination didn't just happen in real time. It had been in motion, planned, exchanged, timed, days in advance. As LAPD built a parallel case with digital evidence, victimology remained part of the profile. Fabio's public life had been clean, but behind that image, there were fractures invisible to his colleagues. Monica had begun telling select friends that she felt stuck, tired of playing second. These comments, vague and casual on their own, took on different meaning when stacked against forensic data and communication logs. The forensic significance of Chapter 4 wasn't about finding a smoking gun. It was about proving intent through the absence of randomness. The data wasn't erased, it was curated. The killer or killers had used technology not as a tool of convenience, but as a weapon of concealment. And for investigators, that made the silence between messages louder than any confession. By early March 2017, the homicide unit had enough digital evidence to suggest the murder of Fabio Cementilli wasn't spontaneous. But premeditation isn't just proven by messages, it's proven by motive. And money has always been the cleanest motive to track. Fabio's life insurance policy was first flagged during the routine financial review. But what raised the red flag wasn't the amount. It was the timing. In April 2016, Monica Sementilli submitted a request to increase her husband's life insurance benefit to $1.6 million. The documents showed that she initiated the process, citing family coverage optimization as the reason. Fabio's signature appeared on the forms, but forensic analysis later suggested it may not have been written in the same hand as previous samples. The policy listed Monica as the sole beneficiary, no secondary claimants, no trust, nothing earmarked for their children. That detail was striking. In high net worth family policies, even minimal contingencies for minors are common. Fabio had always been described as a devoted father, yet the structure of the payout excluded the very people he publicly prioritized. Either Fabio didn't read the updated policy, or he never approved it at all. Bank records revealed further inconsistencies. Monica had withdrawn over $18,000 in cash within the month before the murder. The transactions were split across branches, just under the threshold that triggers automatic reporting under the Bank Secrecy Act. The withdrawals were flagged by the Financial Crimes Unit not for their amount, but for the pattern. There was no linked purchase. No large deposits followed. The money simply vanished. Monica's spending history also painted a contradictory image. While Fabio had maintained stable finances, documented through years of IRS returns and routine account activity, Monica carried nearly $45,000 in revolving credit debt. Her personal cards had been used extensively for retail, travel, and cash advances. In the months leading up to Fabio's death, she had booked hotel rooms under alternate last names, often on the other side of the city, without explanation. Investigators verified these bookings through hospitality records. One reservation stood out. December 18, 2016, Monica checked into a boutique hotel in Burbank. The registered guest for the second occupant, a man named Robert L. Baker. This was no longer circumstantial. The investigation now connected a direct digital trail, messages and metadata, with a parallel financial one. Monica's actions weren't reactive. They followed a progression: policy, withdrawal, contact, disappearance. In homicide cases involving family, forensic accountants often work in tandem with detectives. Here, that coordination revealed that Monica had also attempted to initiate an advance inquiry with the insurance carrier just days after Fabio's death. She asked whether the funds could be dispersed without probate. That email was sent on January 28th, while the investigation was still active, and the cause of death listed as pending. She didn't mention to the insurance agent that the LAPD had opened a homicide case. In fact, she referred to Fabio's death only as a tragedy at home. This omission became critical. While not illegal, it showed an intent to extract payment while controlling the narrative. And when narratives are managed too tightly, investigators start looking for what's been removed. The picture forming wasn't one of grief, it was one of logistics. The forensic breakthrough came when a copy of the insurance signature was digitally overlaid with Fabio's known handwriting. Subtle inconsistencies were found in line pressure and angle. It wasn't enough to prove forgery, but enough to justify a handwriting expert's formal analysis, which was subsequently ordered. This wasn't about catching someone in an outright lie. It was about identifying manipulation disguised as paperwork. To the outside world, Monica's life looked like an upper-middle-class success story. Married to a globally respected stylist, 2 children, a home in a safe neighborhood. But behind the doors, the records suggested something else: an effort to consolidate control, reroute assets, and isolate financial power. In a quiet moment during one interview, one detective later recalled thinking, "Some murders come from rage, others from impulse. But this came from accounting." And that was the story emerging. Not chaos, not a sudden snap, but a step-by-step transfer of risk from a husband who had stability to a spouse who had motive. In the absence of emotion, investigators followed what was left behind: a paper trail. And this one was sharper than any weapon found. By April 2017, the Sementilli investigation had established a motive, a digital footprint, and a financial trail. But it still lacked a second set of hands, someone physically present at the scene. That changed with a trace left in Oregon. It wasn't a dramatic break, no frantic tip or last-minute confession, just a routine query from the FBI's Criminal Justice Information Services alerting LAPD to a biometric match logged out of state. The match came from a latent fingerprint submitted by a patrol officer in Portland, tied to a suspicious individual detained for loitering near a residential property. The name on the Oregon license was Christopher Austin. He had no major record, just minor charges related to trespassing and illegal possession of a concealed blade. But what stood out was the fingerprint. It matched the smudge partial recovered from the cementilli patio door. Investigators acted quickly. Austin was placed under surveillance. When authorities confirmed that his mobile device had pinged off towers near Woodland Hills on the day of Fabio's murder, the LAPD filed for extradition. Austin was arrested without incident in Multnomah County and transferred to Los Angeles for questioning. During the intake process, investigators discovered Austin had once worked as a correctional supervisor in California, but resigned over a decade earlier after a misconduct complaint. Since then, he drifted. Odd jobs, side work, no fixed income. What connected him to the case was more than a fingerprint. Surveillance from a nearby ATM in Encino showed Austin withdrawing cash just 2 days after the murder, using a card later tied to Robert Baker. The implications were now stacked. Physical presence at the scene, digital contact with Baker, and financial transactions immediately following the crime. Austin's first interview was guarded. He claimed he didn't know the Cementillis, said he'd never been to that part of Los Angeles. But confronted with security footage and the fingerprint report, he stopped denying. Instead, he shifted to omission. He admitted being in the area, claimed Baker had asked him to drive down from Fresno for a job. He described picking Baker up near Reseda and dropping him a few blocks from the Cementilli home, then waiting in a vehicle parked down the street. According to his statement, he never entered the property. He was told it was just business. What raised attention in the room wasn't the confession, it was the phrasing. Just business doesn't fit a burglary. It doesn't fit self-defense. It fits a task. Austin's vehicle was impounded and examined. A small blood smear was detected on the interior door panel. Swabbed, processed, and matched to Fabio's DNA. That placed the victim's blood inside a car driven by a man who claimed never to have been within 20 feet of the crime scene. Confronted again, Austin offered a new version of events. He said Baker returned to the car shaken and bleeding, and may have transferred blood from his clothing to the seat. He insisted he didn't know what Baker had done. I thought it was some sort of confrontation, not this. But his phone told a different story. Geolocation data placed Austin's device inside the property perimeter between 4:30 p.m. and 4:42 p.m., not idling nearby, not in the car. It showed short movements consistent with someone walking, approaching, and leaving the property. This directly contradicted his claim of remaining outside. In addition, chat logs recovered from an encrypted messaging app used by Baker revealed short exchanges between the two men on January 22nd, the day before the murder. One line read, "She's handling the door. You just time it." She was never named, but investigators knew who lived in that house and who had disarmed the alarm system that morning. From a forensic timeline perspective, Austin's arrest filled the final operational gap. With Baker as the likely assailant and Monica coordinating from within the house, Austin's role was that of facilitator, getting Baker in, getting him out, and staying silent. The charges came fast: accessory to murder, obstruction, and destruction of potential evidence. He was offered a plea deal in exchange for cooperation and full disclosure of communications between him and Baker. Faced with the prospect of life in prison, he agreed. His testimony was recorded in a closed deposition. He stated that Monica and Baker had been in contact for over a year. He described being brought in late, just weeks before the murder. He was paid in cash, delivered in multiple installments to avoid detection. He did not admit to stabbing Fabio, but he admitted to helping make it possible. The emotional weight of Austin's confession didn't come from shock. It came from the cold clarity of structure. Everyone had a role, everyone had a script, and the man who bled to death in his backyard never knew he was surrounded by planning. The trial of Monica Cementilli began on April 15, 2025, inside Department 105 of the Clara Shortridge Foltz Criminal Justice Center in downtown Los Angeles. After 8 years of procedural motions, forensic reviews, and testimony from co-defendants, the case was ready for a jury. The courtroom was under heavy scrutiny, not because of celebrity, but because of the case's calculated nature. There was no frantic outburst, no moment of obvious madness. What the prosecution intended to show was design. The state opened with an outline of evidence. Monica's pattern of communication with Robert Baker, her changes to Fabio's life insurance policy, the fingerprint from Christopher Austin, and the digital trail linking all three. Prosecutors argued that Monica orchestrated the murder of her husband by granting access to their home, disabling the alarm, and ensuring Baker could enter unseen. The goal: eliminate her husband and collect $1.6 million in insurance money. The timeline presented was tight and clean. The alarm system was disarmed by Monica's code at 11:08 a.m. Fabio was last active on his phone at 4:12 p.m. Router logs showed an unregistered MAC address briefly connecting to the home's Wi-Fi at 4:27 p.m. At 4:29, a camera across the street captured a hooded figure walking toward the Cementilli driveway. At 4:44 p.m., Fabio's phone disconnected. At 5:14 p.m., the 911 call came from his daughter. Evidence introduced included the forensic analysis of a hair found on the victim's shirt, matching Baker's mitochondrial DNA, and a message pulled from an iCloud backup that read, "You said no more waiting. I'm ready when you are." This, prosecutors asserted, was sent by Baker days before the murder and aligned with testimony provided by Austin under plea agreement. Monica's defense team countered with a claim of manipulation. They argued that Baker acted independently out of obsession, driven by delusions. Monica, they insisted, had been groomed by a former lover with a criminal background who ultimately committed the murder without her knowledge or involvement. They portrayed her as a woman emotionally isolated in her marriage, unaware that the man she had reconnected with was capable of homicide. Cross-examination of Austin was tense. The defense attempted to frame him as unreliable, self-serving, and motivated by a plea deal. But the prosecution neutralized that point with a sequence of evidentiary support. Time-stamped texts, financial transfers, and cell location data showing all three actors, Monica, Baker, and Austin, moving in coordination across separate phases of the plan. The courtroom remained composed throughout the proceedings, but the emotional toll surfaced during victim impact statements. Fabio's eldest daughter testified about the morning of January 23rd, how her father kissed her on the forehead before making coffee, how that would be the last thing she remembered. The room didn't erupt, it stiffened. Monica did not testify. Her attorneys cited the Fifth Amendment. Instead, they relied on the argument that no direct evidence placed her at the crime scene at the time of death. That distinction became their firewall: proximity versus intent. But the prosecution's closing statement dismantled the defense's final position. The law, they reminded jurors, does not require the hand to hold the knife if it gave permission for the door to be open. The jury deliberated for 5 days. They returned on June 17, 2025. Monica Cementilli was found guilty of first-degree murder with special circumstances, financial gain, and lying in wait. The mandatory sentence was life without the possibility of parole. The verdict didn't trigger an audible reaction. There were no dramatic gasps or outbursts. But for those in the room who had followed every stage of the investigation, it marked the end of something calculated and long. The system had moved slowly, but it had moved with certainty. Outside the courtroom, the district attorney's office held a short press conference. They didn't focus on victory. They focused on what the case represented: how premeditated violence doesn't always look like rage, how people can construct murder the way others construct alibis, detail by detail, until it fits. Inside, Monica stood with no visible expression as the sentence was read. She declined to speak. Her legal team announced their intention to appeal. That motion was expected, but by the court's records and the weight of evidence, the case had closed. The sentencing hearing for Monica Cementilli took place on June 25, 2025, in a Los Angeles County courtroom that had witnessed nearly a decade of grief, discovery, and forensic unraveling. After nearly 8 years of investigation, and 5 of those spent in pre-trial motions, Monica was finally convicted as the architect behind the brutal murder of her husband, Fabio Cementilli. The sentence was decisive: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. There was no audible gasp from the courtroom, only silence. It wasn't a moment of drama, it was a moment of certainty. What once appeared as a grieving widow had, over the course of the trial, been exposed as the central force behind a premeditated killing carried out not in rage, but with methodical cruelty. The motive: a $1.6 million life insurance policy signed and updated just months before Fabio's murder. The killer: Robert Baker, Monica's former lover. The link: a pattern of digital communications, deleted and retrieved, stretching back years and culminating in a conspiracy that left one man dead and two children without their father. During sentencing, the court heard victim impact statements from Fabio's Canadian relatives. His siblings, former stylists themselves, spoke not of revenge, but of betrayal. One statement read, "We trusted Monica with our brother's heart. We never imagined we should have feared for his life." His daughters, now young adults, had split in their positions. One appeared in court and broke down as she addressed the judge. The other declined to speak but submitted a sealed letter. The details of that letter were not made public, but it reportedly expressed conflict, sorrow, and the haunting trauma of discovering that your mother arranged your father's execution. No one rejoiced. There were no headlines with exclamation marks. The conviction wasn't catharsis. It was closure. Mechanical, delayed, and irreversible. In the aftermath of the conviction, media outlets quickly revisited the case's peculiar blend of forensic complexity and emotional coldness. The prosecution had not relied on a single dramatic confession or a dramatic DNA twist. Instead, they built a timeline from cell tower triangulations from Monica and Baker's devices, security camera footage pinpointing movement around the house before and after the killing, forensic data extracted from router logs, smart home devices, and text messages, a physical footprint left near the crime scene, later matched to Baker's shoe. It was a modern case cracked through digital residue, not dramatic confrontation. This wasn't a whodunit. It was a how did they think they could get away with it? Investigators noted Monica's calm demeanor in the days following Fabio's death. She gave several media interviews, one of which was later dissected by prosecutors who pointed out misleading timelines, omissions, and apparent over-rehearsed statements. It wasn't the behavior that convicted her. It was the data. What stood out to seasoned detectives was how many precautions Monica believed she had taken. She thought deleting messages would make them disappear. She thought burner phones would isolate communication. She thought avoiding being present at the scene would protect her legally. But the digital trail she and Baker left behind was too long, too messy, and ultimately too damning. In the broader context, the Cementilli case was added to a troubling catalog of insurance-motivated homicides, a category of crime that continues to evolve in sophistication and frequency. According to the FBI, life insurance murders make up a small but chilling portion of domestic homicides, often characterized by meticulous planning and a chilling lack of emotional outburst. These cases challenge our assumptions that love and time insulate us from harm, that marriage offers safety, that betrayal always shows its face. The truth is, some of the most calculated acts of violence are committed not by strangers, but by people whose names are on our wedding certificates, our medical forms, and our emergency contact lists. One of the quiet, lasting contributions of this case is how it highlighted the role of digital forensics in modern homicide investigations. Without Monica's phone metadata, Baker's Google searches, or the router logs from their residence, the case may have remained circumstantial. These weren't dramatic breakthroughs. They were small digital crumbs, each unimpressive alone, but together painting an undeniable map of premeditated intent. Detectives emphasized the importance of timeline reconstruction, the victim's last known movements synced with Monica's travel path, and Baker's own digital trail crossing into the neighborhood. Baker himself, already sentenced in 2023 after pleading guilty to first-degree murder, had previously testified that Monica promised they would be together after Fabio was gone. That promise was never kept. In fact, Baker was cut off shortly after the murder, another digital fact the prosecution revealed. Monica blocked his number and changed her locks. Even among conspirators, loyalty has an expiration date. This case does not invite sympathy for its killers. It demands vigilance. The facade Monica maintained for years, a devoted wife, a co-parent, a grieving widow, was constructed not from emotion, but from calculation. And yet, What makes this story resonate beyond the courtroom is the lesson it leaves behind. In the pursuit of financial gain, Monica sacrificed more than her freedom. She dismantled her family, destroyed a legacy, and turned her own daughters into lifelong victims of emotional trauma. The final truth of the Cementilli case is this: Fabio was not murdered in a moment of rage. He was erased from his own home by someone who stood to benefit most from his absence. I've learned that trust, once broken in silence, can echo louder than any scream. If this story has shown anything, it's that danger doesn't always wear a stranger's face. It often lives quietly beside us, masked as love, family, or routine. Let this case remind us to stay aware, ask questions, and never ignore what doesn't feel right. If this video struck a chord or opened your eyes, I'd love to hear where you're watching from or how this story made you feel. And if it didn't resonate with you, tell me why. I want to grow with every story we tell. If this kind of true crime content speaks to you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that matter.